Ektor stared hard at the mission parameters on her HUD, disbelieving what she saw. She always did what she was told when her Katarian handlers gave her orders, but this target gave her pause. It was a human colony, and Ektor's memories of the last time she encountered a human made her hesitate to accept the mission. She remembered it clearly. A human mercenary named James Green had Ektor dead to rights in his sights during the Battle of Kalox VII. But instead of blowing her head off like his comrades were screaming at him to do, he lowered his rifle and let her go. No one had ever shown Ektor mercy like that before. It shook her to her core, making her question if humans really were the inferior savages she'd always been taught they were. But orders were orders. Ektor prepped her scout ship and engaged the cloaking device, jumping to the remote world to surveil the human settlement. As she watched them through high-powered scopes, she was struck by their industriousness as they toiled together to build a life on this harsh planet. She observed them sharing meager rations without conflict, tending to each other's wounds, consoling upset children. These humans had a sense of community and empathy, unlike anything in Carian society. A terse message from command interrupted Ektor's fascinated observations. Eliminate the target immediately or face censure. They revealed critical intel. This colony harbored key leaders of the ragtag human resistance, a thorn in the Empire's side. Killing this target would cripple the resistance and cement Katarian rule over the sector. Ektor hesitated, pulse rifle in hand, crosshairs fixed on the oblivious settlement. She thought of the mercy James had shown her. Could she really annihilate these humans in cold blood? Accepting this mission would secure her place in the Katarian elite, but could she live with herself afterward? As alarm klaxons blared and colonists scattered in a panic far below, Ektor realized she had a momentous choice to make. Ektor engaged her ship's cloaking field and descended towards the human colony, scanners probing for a suitable landing spot. She set down in a narrow ravine a click from the settlement, powering down all non-essential systems. Checking her rifle and gear, she slipped out into the rust-colored scrublands, advanced camouflage rendering her nearly invisible against the arid terrain. As she crept closer, ducking behind boulders and spiny vegetation, Ektor activated her helmet's magnification overlay. Her HUD filled with a live feed, revealing unexpected details of colony life. In the central atrium, a one-armed man with a bionic prosthetic limb was teaching an attentive group of children, sketching out equations on an improvised chalkboard. Nearby, two colonists were carefully mapping out irrigation channels, debating optimal water flow. The more Ektor observed, the more she saw glimmers of brilliance. These humans were not just surviving, but innovating and thriving against incredible odds. She watched a pregnant colonist waddle into the open-air infirmary, where a medic clad in a fraying lab coat examined her intently, face etched with focused compassion. This was no nest of insurgents. It was a sanctuary of life and potential amidst the ravages of a bitter war. Nestled in her sniper's perch, Ektor intercepted snippets of radio chatter. A transmission crackled across the encrypted channel, new intel from Katarian command. The details made her blood run cold. Her target, the linchpin of the resistance, was their leader James Carter himself. Eliminating him would shatter the burgeoning alliance of rebels and refugees alike. Ektor's finger hovered over the trigger, following Carter's tall form as he moved through the atrium. He paused to tousle a young boy's hair, face creasing into a warm smile. The child beamed up at him adoringly. Ektor's aim faltered. She thought of the mercy he'd shown her all those years ago. How could she repay that undeserved kindness with a kill shot? She had to know more. Engaging her suit's metamorphic weave, Ektor shifted her appearance to that of a bedraggled human refugee. She pulled a tattered shawl over her head and stashed her Katarian gear, descending into the colony outskirts. As she limped through the perimeter gate, leaning heavily on a walking stick, a slender woman with kind eyes approached. "Welcome, traveler. I'm Sarah. You look like you've been through quite an ordeal. Come, let's get you some food and a place to rest." Taken aback by the unquestioning compassion, Ektor followed Sarah into the heart of the colony, passing small dwellings and communal facilities. Everywhere she looked, humans and aliens alike worked side by side, mending equipment, preparing meals, tending to the young and infirm. This place was an impossible oasis of cooperation in the midst of a fractured, war-torn galaxy. Sarah led her to a small tent, gesturing for her to take a seat on a woven mat. "Wait here. I'll fetch some rations and supplies." She laid a gentle hand on Hector's shoulder, eyes brimming with empathy. "You're safe now." As Hector sat alone, a shadow fell across the tent flap. James Carter ducked inside, regarding her intently. He spoke in a low, urgent tone. "I know who you are, Hector of the Catarians. I never forget a face, especially one I once held in my sights." Hector tensed, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Carter held up a hand. "Peace. I mean you no harm, but we need to talk. The future of this colony and the entire resistance hangs in the balance." He crouched down to eye level, gaze boring into hers. "I saw the hesitation in you then, just as I see the conflict in you now. You're not their mindless killing machine. There's a shred of humanity in you, fighting to break free. It's time to choose, Hector. Will you complete your mission and snuff out the brightest hope this sector has seen in decades? Or will you take a stand and help us defend what we've built here?" Hector stared back at him, palms sweating. In Carter's eyes, she saw her own crossroads, the promise of a different path, a higher purpose. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. She knew her next words would shape not only her fate, but the destiny of billions. Hector's gaze locked with Carter's, her mind racing. In that moment, she made her choice. "I was sent to kill you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't do it. This place, these people, it's more than I ever imagined." Carter's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Why should I believe you?" Hector reached into her pocket and retrieved a small data chip. "This contains classified Catarian intelligence. Attack plans, troop movements, everything. It's yours now." Carter took the chip, studying it carefully before pocketing it. "It's a start, but trust is earned, not given." "I understand," Hector nodded. "Let me prove myself. I can help fortify your defenses, train your people. The Catarians will come for me, for all of us, when they realize I've turned." Carter considered this for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Welcome to the resistance, Hector." Over the next weeks, Hector threw herself into preparing the colony. She worked alongside the humans, showing them how to reinforce structures against Catarian weaponry and set up early warning systems. In the makeshift training grounds, she drilled a core group of fighters in advanced combat techniques. One recruit stood out, Michael Silva, a young soldier with quick reflexes and a sharp mind. During a particularly intense sparring session, Silva managed to slip past Hector's guard, landing a solid hit. "Good," Hector grunted, a hint of approval in her voice. "But your left side is still open. Again." As they trained, Hector noticed the wary glances and hushed whispers from other colonists. She overheard snippets of conversation. "Can we really trust the alien? What if it's all a trick?" Hector pushed the doubts aside, focusing on the task at hand. She knew actions would speak louder than words. One evening, as Hector was recalibrating the perimeter sensors, her Tarian communicator crackled to life. A familiar voice cut through the static. "Operative Hector, report status immediately. Failure to respond will be considered treason." Hector's blood ran cold. She rushed to find Carter, bursting into the command center. "They're coming," she said, breathless. "A Catarian strike team. We don't have much time." Carter's face hardened. "How long?" "Hours at most. We need to—" An explosion rocked the colony, cutting her off mid-sentence. Alarms blared as panicked shouts filled the air. "They're already here," Hector realized with dawning horror. Carter grabbed his rifle, barking orders into his comms unit. "All units, battle stations! This is not a drill!" Hector sprinted towards the sound of weapons fire, Silva falling in beside her. They rounded a corner to find a group of Catarian soldiers advancing on the colony's main gate. "Remember your training," Hector said, drawing her own weapon. "Stay low, use cover, and watch each other's backs." The battle was fierce and chaotic. Hector moved with fluid grace, her assassin's training allowing her to anticipate the Catarians' every move. She called out enemy positions, guiding the human defenders to outmaneuver their attackers. In the heat of the fight, Ektor saw a Katarian sniper taking aim at her exposed position. Before she could react, Silva tackled her to the ground. The shot meant for her head grazed his shoulder instead. "Silva!" Ektor cried out, dragging him behind cover. "Why did you do that?" Through gritted teeth, Silva managed a pained smile. "That's what teammates do." As the last Katarian fell, an eerie silence settled over the battlefield. Ektor helped Silva to the infirmary, her heart pounding from the intensity of the fight and the unexpected sacrifice of her human ally. Later, as the colony tended to its wounded and repaired the damage, Ektor interrogated the captured Katarian squad leader. What she learned chilled her to the bone. "This was just the beginning," she told Carter, her voice grim. "The Katarians plan to conquer this entire sector. Your colony is a key strategic target." Carter's face was etched with concern. "Then we need to strike back, hit them before they can mount a full-scale invasion." Ektor nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. "I know their weaknesses, their command structure. If we can disrupt their war machine at its source—" She trailed off, realizing the enormity of what she was proposing. It would mean cutting ties with her people completely, becoming a true traitor to her kind. But as Ektor looked around at the battered but unbroken human colony, at Silva recovering in the infirmary, at the children peeking out from makeshift shelters, at Carter's determined expression, she knew there was no going back. This place, these people, had awakened something in her she thought long dead, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of hope. Whatever came next, whatever sacrifices lay ahead, Ektor knew one thing with certainty. She would fight to protect this fragile spark of humanity against the encroaching darkness. She turned to Carter, her decision made. "I have an idea. It's risky, but if it works, we might just have a chance." Chance at victory. It's dangerous, but— An ear-splitting shriek tore through the air, cutting off Carter's reply. The ground shuddered beneath their feet as a blinding flash lit up the night sky. Ektor's eyes widened in horror as she recognized the telltale signs of a Katarian orbital bombardment. "They've found us," she hissed, grabbing Carter's arm. "We need to get to the shield generators, now!" They sprinted through the panicked crowd, dodging debris as more impacts rocked the colony. Ektor's mind raced, calculating trajectories and blast patterns. This wasn't a random attack. It was a coordinated strike meant to obliterate every trace of human resistance. At the shield control center, Ektor's fingers flew over the alien console, coaxing the aging technology to life. With a low hum, an iridescent barrier shimmered into existence overhead, deflecting the next salvo of energy bolts. "That won't hold for long," Ektor warned, turning to Carter. "We need to take the fight to them." Carter nodded grimly, activating his comm unit. "All combat-ready personnel to the hangar bay. Prepare for immediate deployment." As they rushed to join the gathering strike force, Ektor spotted a familiar face among the assembled fighters. Michael Silva stood at attention, his shoulders still bandaged, but his eyes burning with persistence. "Silva," Ektor said, surprised. "You should be in the infirmary." He met her gaze steadily. "With all due respect, ma'am, I'm not sitting this one out." A ghost of a smile tugged at Ektor's lips. "Then let's make it count." The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. While the colony's defenders engaged the Katarian fighters, Ektor would lead a small team to infiltrate the enemy flagship and disable its main weapons array from within. Their stealth shuttle slipped past the chaotic dogfight, latching onto the massive Katarian vessel's hull. Ektor led the way, her intimate knowledge of Katarian ship design guiding them through maintenance shafts and rarely used corridors. They encountered sporadic resistance, dispatching Katarian security teams with ruthless efficiency. Ektor moved like a force of nature, her body a lethal instrument honed by centuries of training. Silva kept pace, his raw talent complementing her refined skill. At last, they reached the engineering deck. Ektor's fingers danced across the control panel, initiating the shutdown sequence for the ship's primary weapon systems. A satisfied smile crossed her face as warning klaxons began to blare. "We did it," Silva breathed, relief evident in his voice. The triumph was short-lived. A chilling voice cut through the air, speaking in the harsh consonants of the Catarian tongue. "Well done, little traitor. I trained you well." Ektor spun around, her blood running cold. There, flanked by a squad of elite Catarian assassins, stood Vasra, her former mentor and the deadliest killer in the Empire. "Vasra," Ektor whispered, instinctively shifting into a combat stance. The Catarian's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Did you think we wouldn't notice your defection? That we would let such treachery go unpunished?" Without warning, Vasra lunged forward. Ektor barely managed to deflect the blow, the force of it sending her staggering backward. The two assassins clashed in a blur of motion, each anticipating the other's moves with uncanny precision. Silva and the other humans engaged the rest of the Catarian squad, the confined space erupting into chaos. Ektor fought with everything she had, drawing on skills she'd hoped never to use again. For a moment, it seemed she might prevail. Then came the sickening sound of a blade finding flesh. Ektor turned to see Silva crumple to the ground, a Catarian energy dagger protruding from his side. She moved to help him, but Vasra's iron grip closed around her throat. "Enough games," Vasra hissed. "Surrender now and I'll let your human pet live. Refuse and he dies screaming." Ektor's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out. But as she met Silva's pain-filled gaze, she knew there was only one choice. "I surrender," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Vasra's satisfied chuckle sent chills down her spine. As Catarian restraints closed around her wrists, Ektor caught a glimpse of James Carter on a nearby view screen. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that instant, a silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the Catarian ship disengaged, leaving the battered human colony behind, Ektor allowed herself to be led away. Her body might be in chains, but her mind was already formulating a plan. She would find a way to end this war at any expense to herself. Ektor's world narrowed to a single point of searing agony as the neural probe burrowed deeper into her skull. She bit back a scream, tasting blood where her teeth had cut into her cheek. "Impressive," Vasra's cold voice cut through the haze of pain. "But futile. Tell us what we want to know, and this can end." Ektor's eyes fluttered open, meeting her former mentor's gaze. "I've told you everything," she gasped. Vasra's lips curled into a sneer. "We both know that's a lie." The probe pulsed again, sending white-hot tendrils of electricity through Ektor's nervous system. Her body convulsed against the restraints, muscles spasming uncontrollably. Hours blurred into days as the interrogation continued. Ektor retreated into her mind, building mental fortresses around the information that could endanger the human colony. She clung to memories of Carter's determined face, of Silva's unwavering loyalty, using them as anchors against the tide of agony threatening to sweep her away. During a brief respite between sessions, Ektor overheard two guards discussing troop movements. Her keen mind, honed by centuries of training, pieced together fragments of intel. The attack on the human colony wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger strategy to crush resistance across multiple worlds. The realization sent a chill through her battered body. The stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined. A commotion in the corridor snapped Ektor back to full alertness. The sounds of a scuffle, then silence. The cell door slid open, revealing a sight she'd scarcely dared hope for. "Carter?" she croaked, hardly believing her eyes. The human resistance leader moved swiftly to her side, his face a mask of controlled fury as he took in her condition. "We're getting you out of here." Behind him, Silva appeared, looking pale but determined. "Can you stand?" Ektor gritted her teeth as they helped her to her feet, her body screaming in protest. "I'll manage," she said, forcing strength into her voice. They made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Catarian warship, Ektor providing whispered directions despite her weakened state. After a tense firefight near the hangar bay, they ducked into a side passage. "We can't leave yet," Carter said, his voice low and urgent. "There's a data vault 2 levels down. If we can access it, we might find information crucial to stopping the Catarians." Ektor nodded, understanding the risk and necessity of such a move. They proceeded cautiously, using Ektor's knowledge of Katarian ship design to avoid patrols. The data vault itself was a cavernous room filled with glowing terminals. Carter's fingers flew over the alien interface, guided by Ektor's instructions. His face grew grim as he absorbed the information scrolling across the screen. "By the stars," he breathed. "They're planning to hit the Resistance's central command, a heavily fortified jungle planet." Ektor felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Whether from her injuries or the gravity of the situation, she couldn't tell. "How?" "A bioweapon," Carter replied, his voice tight with anger. "Designed to target non-Katarian lifeforms. They'll wipe out the entire Resistance leadership in one strike." A familiar name on the screen caught Ektor's attention. "Vasra," she said, a complex mix of emotions coloring her voice. "She's leading the strike force." In that moment, Ektor knew what she had to do. The path ahead was clear, though it would likely lead to her death. She turned to Carter, her eyes burning with dedication. "I need to go with them," she said, "to warn the Resistance." Carter's brow furrowed. "Ektor, you're in no condition—" She cut him off. "I'm the only one who can get close enough to stop Vasra. This is my chance to make things right." For a long moment, Carter held her gaze. Then slowly he nodded. "We'll get you there." As they made their final preparations, Ektor felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. She looked at Carter and Silva, these humans who had shown her a different way of life, a purpose beyond mindless obedience. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Silva clasped her arm, his eyes shining with emotion. "Come back to us," he said. "We've got a colony to rebuild." Ektor managed a small smile. "I will," she promised. With a final nod to Carter, she turned and strode towards the waiting shuttle. Her body still ached from the torture, but her mind was clear. She had a mission to complete, a debt to repay. As the shuttle's engines hummed to life, Ektor allowed herself one last glance at the humans who had become her unlikely allies. Then she faced forward, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. The jungle planet awaited, and with it a reckoning long overdue. The jungle planet loomed before Ektor as her shuttle emerged from hyperspace. Verdant canopies stretched as far as the eye could see, concealing the Resistance base somewhere in their depths. She guided the craft into a low approach, skimming just above the treetops. Ektor's body still ached from her ordeal, but her mind was razor sharp. She located a small clearing and set the shuttle down with practiced precision. As the engines powered down, she took a deep breath, centering herself. The humid air hit her like a wall as she stepped out. Ektor moved silently through the undergrowth, her assassin's training allowing her to slip past motion sensors and hidden cameras. She paused at the edge of a small ravine, spotting a camouflaged entrance nestled in the rock face. A figure emerged from the shadows, a female Zoxian, her scaled skin shimmering in dappled sunlight. The guard's reptilian eyes narrowed as she leveled a pulse rifle at Ektor. "Halt!" the Zoxian hissed. "Identify yourself!" Ektor raised her hand slowly. "My name is Ektor. I've defected from the Katarian Empire. I have urgent information for your leadership." The guard's grip on her weapon tightened. "Why should I believe you?" "Because if you don't, everyone in this base will die," Ektor replied, her voice steady. "The Katarians are coming with a bioweapon that will annihilate all non-Katarian lifeforms." Something in Ektor's tone gave the Zoxian pause. After a tense moment, she lowered her rifle slightly. "I'm Hera. Follow me, but make any sudden moves and I'll vaporize you where you stand." Hera led Ektor through winding tunnels into the heart of the base. They emerged into a bustling command center, where a tall, avian-like being stood examining holographic displays. "Commander Talek," Hera announced. "This Katarian claims to have defected. She says there's an imminent threat." Talek's sharp gaze locked onto Ektor. "Explain yourself quickly." Ektor wasted no time. She outlined the Katarian's bioweapon plot, providing specific details on troop movements and attack vectors. Talek's expression grew increasingly grim as she spoke. "If this is true," he began. A proximity alarm cut him off. One of the technicians called out, "Sir, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace." Talek's eyes widened. He turned to his staff, barking orders. "Sound the evacuation alarm! All personnel to battle stations!" Outside, the Katarian ships descended through the atmosphere. Canisters rained down on the jungle, releasing a sickly green mist. Where it touched, plants withered and died within seconds. Hector and Hera raced to the perimeter defenses. Katarian dropships were landing, disgorging waves of assault troops. Hera coordinated the outer guards, while Hector moved to plug gaps in the line. The sound of pulse fire filled the air as Katarian and resistance forces clashed. Hector ducked under a swipe from a Katarian blade, countering with a devastating series of strikes that left her opponent crumpled on the ground. A pained cry drew her attention. Commander Talek stumbled back, clutching a smoking wound in his side. Hector rushed to his aid, dragging him behind cover. "The base is compromised," Talek gasped. You have the most combat experience here. Take command, save as many as you can." Hector nodded grimly, her mind already formulating a plan. She keyed into the base's comm system. "All remaining fighters, fall back to evacuation point Beta. Hera, Zek, meet me at Hangar 3. Minutes later, Hector stood before a small group of resistance members. Hera was there, along with a male Chaxil whose cybernetic implants marked him as Zek. "We're going to hit them where it hurts," Hector said. "Board Vazra's flagship and disable the bioweapon systems." Zek's electronic eyes whirred as he processed the information. "I can interface with their computers, shut down the deployment mechanism." Hector nodded. "Good, let's move." They fought their way to a resistance gunship, blasting off amid a hail of Katarian fire. Hector piloted with precision, weaving through the chaotic space battle raging above the planet. With a bone-jarring impact, they latched onto the hull of Vazra's massive flagship. Hector led the way, her familiarity with Katarian ship design guiding them through access tunnels and maintenance shafts. They encountered sporadic resistance, dispatching Katarian security teams with ruthless efficiency. At last, they reached the bioweapon control center. Hector's blood ran cold as she saw a familiar figure standing before the main console. Vazra turned, a cruel smile twisting her features. "I knew you would come, little traitor." Hector's muscles tensed, ready for action. "It ends here, Vazra." Without warning, the two assassins exploded into motion. They clashed in a deadly dance, each anticipating the other's moves with terrifying accuracy. Blows were exchanged at lightning speed, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. As they fought, Zek worked frantically at a nearby terminal, his cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the Katarian systems. Hera provided covering fire, holding off Katarian reinforcements trying to breach the chamber. Hector felt her strength beginning to fade, the toll of her recent ordeals catching up with her. Vazra pressed her advantage, landing a vicious strike that sent Hector reeling. "You've grown weak," Vazra sneered. "Sentiment has made you soft." Hector's eyes narrowed. In that moment, she realized the truth. Her experiences with the humans hadn't weakened her. They had given her something to fight for beyond mere survival. With renewed focus, Hector launched a blistering counterattack. Her strikes flowed with deadly precision, pushing Vazra back step by step. A final devastating combination sent her former mentor crashing to the ground, critically wounded but still alive. "It's done," Zek called out. "Bioweapon deployment systems are offline." Hector nodded, relief washing over her. "Let's get out of here." They fought their way back to their ship, Hector supporting an injured Hera. As they prepared to disengage from the Katarian vessel, alarms blared throughout the hangar. "The bioweapon," Hera gasped, her scales taking on a sickly hue. "I've been exposed." Hector's heart clenched. "We'll get you to medical—" Hera shook her head. "No time. Get clear. I'll hold them off." Before Hector could protest, Hera shoved her into the airlock. The Zoxian's eyes met hers one last time before the door slid shut. As their ship blasted away from the Katarian flagship, Hector watched the hangar erupt in a ball of fire. Hera's final act of sacrifice had ensured their escape. Hector turned to Zek, her expression grim but determined. "Set course for the nearest resistance outpost. We need to regroup and plan our next move." As the stars stretched into streaks of light around them, Ektor allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The cost had been high, but they had struck a significant blow against the Caterians. The war was a long way to go, but for the first time in centuries, Ektor felt a flicker of genuine hope. Hope as the stars streaked past their viewport. The respite was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the ship, jolting Ektor from her moment of reflection. She rushed to the cockpit, where Zek's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed incoming data. "Multiple Katarian vessels dropping out of hyperspace," he reported, his electronic voice tight with urgency. "They've tracked us." Ektor's hands flew across the control panel, assessing their situation. A quick glance at the tactical display confirmed her fears. They were grossly outnumbered and outgunned. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," she barked into the comm. "Scatter formation, keep them guessing." The small fleet of resistance vessels broke apart, each one zigzagging through space as Tarian energy beams lanced between them. Ektor's piloting skills were pushed to their limits as she wove through the barrage, feeling the ship shudder with each near miss. A pained groan came from behind her. Commander Talek stumbled into the cockpit, clutching his injured side. "Status report," he wheezed. "Not good," Ektor replied grimly. "We've lost the Zephyr and the Starblade. Katarian forces are closing in." As if to emphasize her point, their ship rocked violently. Sparks erupted from a nearby console as a glancing hit breached their shields. "We can't keep this up," Zek warned. "Our engines are redlining." Ektor's mind raced, searching for options. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, a familiar voice crackled through the comm static. "Ektor, do you read me? This is Carter. We have your position." Relief flooded through her. "Carter, we're under heavy fire. We need—" "Listen carefully," he cut in. "I'm transmitting coordinates. There's a wormhole. Unstable, but it's your only shot. We'll rendezvous on the other side." The data flashed across Ektor's screen. She hesitated for a split second, weighing the risks. Then she made her decision. "All remaining ships, form up on me," she ordered. "We're making a run for these coordinates. It's going to get bumpy." Ektor pushed the engines beyond their limits, feeling the ship groan in protest. The Katarian vessels gave chase, their weapons fire intensifying as they realized their quarry was about to slip away. Ahead, space itself seemed to twist and distort. The wormhole's maw gaped before them, a swirling vortex of cosmic energy. "Brace for impact!" Ektor shouted as they plunged into the anomaly. Reality warped around them. For endless seconds, Ektor felt as if her body was being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. Then, with a final lurch, they burst back into normal space. Zek's sensors pinged. "New contacts," he reported, "but they're not Katarian." Ektor looked up to see a fleet of unfamiliar ships arrayed before them. At their center was a massive colony vessel, dwarfing everything around it. A transmission came through, and Ektor's heart leapt as she recognized the voice. "Welcome to the party," Michael Silva said, his familiar grin evident even through the audio. "Looks like you could use a hand." As Ektor guided their battered ship towards the human fleet, she saw other resistance vessels emerging from the wormhole behind them. They had made it, bloodied and diminished, but alive. Carter's face appeared on the main view screen. "Glad you made it," he said. "We've got a lot to discuss. The war's about to enter a new phase, and we need you at the helm." Ektor nodded, her mind already shifting to the challenges ahead. As their ship docked with the colony vessel, she knew that the real fight was just beginning. The colony ship's cavernous hangar bustled with activity as resistance fighters and human allies coordinated their next moves. Ektor strode purposefully through the organized chaos, her mind racing. She found Carter and Silva huddled over a holographic display, their faces grim. "We've identified our target," Carter said without preamble. "The Katarian shipyards." Silva nodded. "It's a risky play, but if we can cripple their production capabilities, we might just turn the tide of this war," Ektor finished. The plan came together quickly. A massive allied fleet would push into the heart of Katarian territory, unleashing fighters and boarding craft to sow chaos. Ektor's command ship would spearhead the assault, utilizing a daring ramming maneuver to breach the main operations hub. As they prepared to launch, Ektor felt a familiar tension coiling in her gut. This was it, the moment that could decide the fate of multiple civilizations. The jump to Tarian space was jarring. One moment they were in the relative safety of Allied territory. The next, they erupted into a maelstrom of energy weapons fire and explosions. "All ships execute attack pattern Sigma." Ektor's voice rang out over the comms. Her fingers danced across the control panel, guiding their vessel through the storm of Katarian defenses. Fighters swarmed around them, human and alien craft alike engaging in desperate dogfights. Boarding ships latched onto Tarian orbital factories, disgorging strike teams to wreak havoc from within. Ektor's ship shuddered as it plowed through the outer defenses. Alarms blared as the hull integrity dropped dangerously low. "Brace for impact," she shouted. With a bone-jarring crash, they smashed through the operations hub's outer shell. Emergency force fields snapped into place, sealing the breach. Ektor unstrapped herself, gesturing to Carter, Silva, and Zek. "Let's move!" They fought their way through twisting corridors, Katarian defenders falling before their combined assault. Zek's cybernetic implants sparked and whirred as he hacked through security protocols, guiding them towards the central computer core. The final chamber was a nightmare of crisscrossing energy beams and automated defenses. Silva's expert marksmanship cleared a path, while Carter's tactical genius kept them one step ahead of the Katarian counterattacks. At last they reached the core. Zek interfaced directly with the alien systems, his body trembling with the strain. "Initiating cascade," he grunted, "shutting down shipyard infrastructure. Now!" Throughout the massive facility, systems began to fail. Production lines ground to a halt. Weapons emplacements powered down. For a moment, victory seemed within reach. Then a new alarm pierced the air. Ektor's blood ran cold as she deciphered the Tarian warning glyphs flashing across nearby screens. "They're overloading the reactors," she breathed. "They'll destroy the entire shipyard rather than let us have it." The realization hit her like a physical blow. Someone would have to stay behind to contain the meltdown long enough for the Allied fleet to escape, and she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that it had to be her. Ektor opened her mouth to give the order to send her companions to safety, but before she could speak, she saw the grit in their eyes. Carter, Silva, Zek, none of them would abandon her now. "Three-pronged approach," Carter said, his voice steady. "I'll coordinate the fleet's retreat." Silva nodded grimly. "My pilots and I will run interference. Keep the Tarians off your backs." "Zek and I will attempt to contain the reactor breach," Ektor finished. "It won't stop the explosion, but it might buy enough time for the others to clear the blast radius." They shared a moment of silent understanding, each knowing the weight of what was to come. Then, without further words, they sprang into action. Carter's voice crackled over the comms, issuing rapid-fire orders to the retreating Allied armada. Silva sprinted for his fighter, already calling out attack vectors to his squadron. Ektor and Zek raced through the failing facility, fighting their way to the reactor control room. Katarian defenders threw themselves at the intruders with suicidal fury, but nothing could stop their advance. They reached the pulsing heart of the shipyards, a massive chamber housing the fusion reactors. Zek's fingers flew across alien control panels, while Ektor fought to redirect power to the containment systems. "It's not enough," Zek shouted over the rising whine of overloading machinery. "We need more energy." Ektor's eyes fell on her pulse rifle, then on the bank of auxiliary power cells lining one wall. A desperate plan formed in her mind. "Keep working on the containment field," she ordered. "I'll buy us more time." She sprinted to the power cells, rigging her weapon to overload. The jury-rigged contraption sparked dangerously as she integrated it into the power grid. A deafening roar filled the chamber as the reactor core began to destabilize. Ektor watched the sensors, seeing Allied ships slipping away to safety. Not enough. Not yet. "Zek," she called out. "Status!" The cyborg's eyes glowed with an inner light as he interfaced directly with the alien systems. 90% of our forces have cleared the danger zone. We need a few more minutes." Hector nodded grimly. She reached for the final power coupling, knowing that completing the circuit would release a surge of energy that would likely kill her instantly. As her hand closed around the cable, Hector's thoughts turned to the humans who had changed her life, to their unyielding spirit in the face of impossible odds, to the way they had awakened something long dormant within her, a capacity for hope, for selflessness, for genuine connection. She smiled, a sense of peace washing over her. In this moment, she was no longer the remorseless Katarian assassin. She was simply Hector, doing what needed to be done to protect those she had come to care for. With a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening, Hector completed the circuit. Pain unlike anything she had ever experienced coursed through her body. Her vision whited out, her muscles spasmed uncontrollably, and yet somehow she remained conscious. Through blurry eyes, she saw Zek working frantically at the controls. The containment field pulsed with newfound strength, holding back the tide of destruction for precious seconds longer. Alarms blared, warning of imminent reactor collapse. Hector knew their time had run out. With the last of her strength, she keyed the comms. "Carter," she gasped, "get them out of here. It's been an honor." The human's voice came back, thick with emotion. "Goodbye, Hector. We won't forget this." As consciousness faded, Hector saw Carter's ship leading the last of the Allied vessels to safety. A sense of profound satisfaction filled her. They had done it. The Katarian war machine had been dealt a crippling blow, and those she cared about would live to fight another day. The reactor's scream reached a fever pitch. Hector closed her eyes at peace with her fate. In her final moments, she felt not fear or regret, but a profound sense of belonging. She had found her place in the universe, standing alongside beings who valued life and freedom above all else. The world went white as the containment field finally failed. The last thing Hector knew was a sense of warmth, of completion, as the shockwave consumed the shipyards and everything in them. Miles away, aboard his retreating vessel, Carter watched the massive explosion bloom against the starfield. Tears stung his eyes as he thought of Hector and Zek's sacrifice, but mixed with his grief was a fierce grit. They would not let this victory be in vain. As the remnants of the Allied fleet regrouped, Carter began formulating their next move. The Katarians had been wounded, but they were far from defeated. The war would rage on, and humanity and its allies would need every ounce of the courage and resilience Hector had shown in her final moments. With a heavy heart but steely purpose, Carter set course for the nearest resistance stronghold. There was still much to be done. The remnants of the Allied fleet limped through space, battered ships clustered protectively around the massive colony vessel. In the command center, a somber mood prevailed as leaders from various species gathered to assess their Pyrrhic victory. Michael Silva's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "The Katarian shipyards are gone, but at a terrible cost." His eyes met Carter's across the room, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Carter stood, his face etched with exhaustion. "Hector and Zek's sacrifice bought us this chance. We can't squander it." Holographic displays flickered to life, showing the devastation wrought upon the Katarian infrastructure. An avian-like Zoxian analyst gestured with a wing arm. "Our latest intelligence suggests we've crippled their production capabilities by approximately 80%. A ripple of cautious optimism spread through the room, but Silva's expression remained grim. "They still have planet killers. If they decide to lash out..." The implications hung heavy in the air. Carter's mind raced, seeking a path forward. His wrist computer chimed softly, signaling an incoming transmission. He frowned, excusing himself from the strategy session. In a quiet alcove, Carter accessed the encrypted message. His eyes widened as he deciphered the contents. Coordinates, a claim of vital intelligence, and a signature that made his blood run cold. James Green. Carter's first instinct was to dismiss it as a trick, a Katarian ploy, but something nagged at him. The coordinates. He pulled up navigational data, his breath catching as he realized their significance. Striding back into the command center, Carter interrupted the ongoing debate. "We have a new development," he announced. All eyes turned to him as he outlined the mysterious communication. Silva's brow furrowed. "A secret human colony? One we didn't even know about? It's a trap, a gruff Volcran captain growled. Carter shook his head. Maybe, but those coordinates, they match the location Ector initially refused to attack, the paradise world she told me about. A tense silence fell over the room. Finally, Silva spoke. We need to check it out. I'll lead a recon team. Plans came together swiftly. Silva assembled a small squad, including the Zoxian soldier Hera, whose adaptive camouflage abilities would prove invaluable. They departed in a nondescript courier vessel, slipping away from the main fleet. Days passed in tense waiting. Carter paced the command deck, plagued by memories of Ector's final moments. He couldn't shake the feeling that he should have found another way, that he had failed her somehow. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, Silva's encoded signal crackled through. You're not going to believe this, his voice held a mix of awe and wariness. We've found it. The feed switched to a visual, revealing a lush, terraformed moon. Nestled among verdant forests and crystal lakes stood a thriving human settlement, protected by shimmering energy fields and sleek defense emplacements. As Silva's team approached the colony's main complex, a figure stepped out to greet them. Carter's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the man he had once pretended to be, James Green. Green's eyes locked onto the camera, seeming to stare directly at Carter across the vast distance of space. Welcome, he said, his voice carrying the weight of hidden purpose. We have much to discuss. The transmission cut off, leaving Carter and the assembled leaders to grapple with this new revelation. Whatever came next would change the course of the war, and perhaps the fate of all their species. The holographic image of James Green flickered, his eyes boring into Carter's across the vastness of space. We have much to discuss, he said, his voice laden with urgency. Carter's mind reeled. The secret human colony, Ector's paradise world, now stood revealed. He steeled himself, keying the comm. We're on our way. Hold position and prepare for our arrival. As the Allied fleet limped towards the coordinates, Carter gathered his closest advisors. Silva's face was grim as he delivered his report. The colony's defenses are formidable. If this is a trap— It's not, Carter interrupted, surprising himself with his certainty. Whatever Green's game is, he needs us. Hours later, Carter stood before the gates of the hidden settlement, flanked by Silva and a contingent of Allied soldiers. Green emerged, flanked by his own security detail. The two men sized each other up, years of mistrust hanging between them. Green broke the silence. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, Carter, but Ector's sacrifice changes everything. At the mention of her name, Carter's eyebrows furrowed. What do you know about that? Green's eyes softened. More than you might think. Come, there's something you need to see. They followed Green into a secure bunker beneath the colony. Banks of alien technology lined the walls, pulsing with hardly restrained energy. At the center stood a device Carter had never seen before, yet seemed hauntingly familiar. Is that— Silva breathed, his eyes wide. Green nodded. Octarian AI core. One Ector helped us acquire. The implications hit Carter like a physical blow. He turned to Green, demanding answers. Green's voice was steady as he laid out the audacious plan. A virus crafted to exploit vulnerabilities in the Qatarian command structure. A backdoor into their capital world, hidden in data Ector had secretly downloaded during her time on the colony. With this, Green gestured to the alien core, we have the processing power to make it work, but we'll need a team to deliver the payload. Carter's mind raced, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. He looked at Silva, saw the same mix of hope and trepidation mirrored in his eyes. I'm in, Silva said, his voice gruff, but we'll need someone who can move unseen. As if on cue, the air shimmered beside them. Hera, the Zoxian soldier, materialized from her adaptive camouflage. I volunteer, she chirped, her avian features set with grit. Green nodded approvingly. I'm coming too. I owe it to Ector. Carter's eyes narrowed at that, but he kept his doubts in check. They needed every advantage they could get. As the colony's scientists worked to integrate the virus with the captured AI, Carter found himself drawn to a quiet overlook. The lush world below seemed a mockery of the devastation they'd left behind. He felt Green's presence before the man spoke. Beautiful, isn't it? Everything Ector dreamed of protecting. Carter's hand unconsciously went to the pulse rifle at his hip. Why are you really doing this, Green? What's your angle? Green's laugh was bitter. You wouldn't believe me if I told you I was trying to do the right thing. No, Carter said flatly. Green sighed. Fair enough. Let's just say I've seen what the Tarians are capable of, what they'll do to worlds like this if we don't stop them. For once, our goals align. Before Carter could press further, alarms blared throughout the complex. They rushed back to the command center, where frantic activity filled the air. We've been discovered, a technician reported. Catarian battle groups converging on our position. Green's face hardened. We're out of time. The virus isn't fully integrated, but it'll have to do. Carter nodded grimly. Prep the stealth cruiser. We launch in 10 minutes. As they hurried to the launch bay, Carter caught Silva's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The sleek black ship rose from its hidden berth, cloaking fields shimmering to life. As they accelerated towards the stars, leaving the paradise world behind, Carter allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Catarians thought they had them cornered. They had no idea what was coming.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.